I want to talk a little bit about student assignment the way it is right now, and I want to talk a little bit about going forward, what our superintendent is envisioning us looking like as far as student assignment is concerned. Right now, we're working under a plan that was first approved back in 2004. And it's the concept of looking at the subzones and zones. A lot of you probably have children in the school district. You're probably well aware of how we do the assignment, or kind of aware of how we do the assignment. Some of it's still a mystery to a lot, I understand that. But before we have the current plan, we used to have a plan probably very similar to what I used to have back when I grew up in Maine. We had a boundary system. Some of you probably went and lived in a community that had such a system, where there was a circle or a boundary around where you lived, and you knew exactly where you went to school. And we don't have that system right now. And that's a frustration to a lot of people, especially newcomers to our county. And if you're a realtor, a really particular frustration to you because you're not able to tell people where you live. We won't go backwards, we'll go forward. So right now we have a system that looks at zones and subzones. We'll talk a little bit about that going forward. We replicate programs for equal and more convenient access. For instance, we have the International Baccalaureate, the ACE, and the arts program in all three of our zones. If we have a program that parents and students enjoy, we make sure that's available in all three zones. That's the equity part of our plan, so we ensure that. One of the things that we've changed since we had a boundary system, and the last time we had one in place was in 1997, 1998, it was 2 years after I moved here. One of the key components that we removed from student assignment was the elimination of race as a criteria. Before 1997, we were under court order for desegregation, and we drew boundaries to make sure that we had the appropriate racial mix that the federal courts wanted us to have. So when we came out from under the desegregation order, we went away from race as a criteria for assigning students, and we went more to a choice model, which we evolved to what we have right now. The current plan that we use was first implemented excuse me, in 2005-2006. The underlying foundation of our student assignment process right now is school choice. And school choice means to us that parents have a choice of schools to choose from to send their child to. It does not mean they get to pick the school, but they do at least have that choice. And they also have a choice of programs, be it special programs, be it things that we offer in our schools, such as after school or before school, activities such as Odyssey of Your Mind. All of our schools are unique, and we think that the parents should have that ability to choose a school that matches their student is the best fit. So when we look at our current plan, there are 4 key goals, and I want to review them because going forward, these are some of the things that we might want to consider keeping into any plan that we go forward with. 4 key goals: student achievement, equity, diversity, and growth. And I think those things still apply to us now and going forward. We are a growing county. We've got to consider growth in our county and how we're going to seat all of the students. And the 4 key features of our current plan are the assignment zones, sibling and proximity preferences, the lottery system, and special attractors. Now, those 4 key features support the 4 key goals of the plan. I'm going to jump real quickly into the zones because this is a concept that we're using now, but in the future we might go away from. And it's probably one of the things that confuse, as I said before, newcomers to our district. If you have students in the county, you probably understand this a bit. There are 3 zones that students are assigned within. It's not typical for students to be assigned cross zones, but they can be assigned in particular cases at Dunbar High because it's a magnet. I think that's the only case where we have it. But the 3 zones are now separated into 3 subzones. And we've affectionately called them, and I'll call the E zones E1, E2, and E3. You have the same situation in the south, S1, S2, S3, and W1, W2, and W3. Now this is important to know because where you live within those zones and subzones determines what schools you can choose from. If you live in the middle subzone, you could select all of the schools in that particular zone as a school of choice. Dr. Atkins mentioned during his talk that there's a particular zone where you have up to 17 choices. If you live in E2, you can select all of the elementary schools in the E zone. There's 17 of them. So when we talk about the lottery process, we're asking parents to do the research on 17 different schools, make a determination which is the best for them, and then rank them from 1 to 17.
And provide transportation out of a single neighborhood to 17 different elementary schools.
Absolutely. So you could live here and be assigned to a school up here, which is a stretch. So if you live in the middle zone, like I said, you can go to any school in that zone. The concept is you can go to the schools that are in your subzone and the adjacent subzone. So if you live in W1, you can go to schools in W1 and W2. Those are the schools you have to choose from. So that is the concept we have right now as far as zones are concerned. So we went from a boundary system to this zone system back in 2004. The second key feature is proximity preferences. Proximity preferences are weights that you enjoy in the lottery that enhance your chances of being assigned to a particular school, only if you rank it as your first choice. And I'll go into the proximity preferences first. Proximity preferences are our attempt as a school district to create the opportunity for students to go to the school closest to their home. They enjoy a weight in the lottery that increases their odds of being assigned to that school. The first one is P1. It's within a 2-mile radius. Now, in the last group they had asked, is that as the crow flies, or is that a driving or walking distance? The 2-mile walkout is a walkout. If you live within 2 miles walking distance, the shortest distance to that school, you have a P1 preference to that school. It's the strongest proximity preference you can enjoy in the lottery. So you live within 2 miles of the school, you rank it as your first choice, you have a pretty good odds of getting assigned to that school. There's also a P2, which means if you live between 2 and 5, you also enjoy a preference. It's not as strong as the P1, but it's still a preference. Again, our attempt as a school district to ensure that kids that live closest to the school have the ability to be assigned to that school. 2 years ago, we determined that there are about 3,000 students in Lee County that did not have a proximity preference at all because they lived too far away from any school. So we thought that that's not an equitable thing. So we made sure every student was mapped to the closest school. If it was outside of 5 miles, we found the one that was closest to them and gave them a preference in the lottery that was the same weight as the P2. I'm going to give you a little piece of data here going forward, because this is kind of the dilemma and the challenge that we face when we change or go to change the student assignment system. Right now, only about 50% of parents select the P1 school as their first choice. So why is that? Why are parents not choosing that school that's closest to their home? I'm a parent in the school district. I have 2 children. They both went to elementary school in Lee County. And I didn't send my kids to the closest elementary school. And there's reasons why. And I probably could answer and provide some data to myself as we go forward with the student assignment plan. But as an organization, we have to go out and seek the answers why that is. And we've done some, and you guys probably received a survey recently asking questions about your first choice school. We're trying to get at the crux of why people choose or don't choose that first choice, that closest school. I'm going to go into sibling preferences here. Let me run over here and change this. The sibling preference is another key feature in the lottery. And what this is our attempt or our need and want to keep students in the same family together assigned to the same school. The sibling guarantee basically says if you have 2 children entering the lottery, the school district of Lee County will assign them to the same school. We want to keep those siblings together. That's if the application was received at the same time, they live in the same household, under the same address. The sibling preference is a little bit different. If you already have a child in a particular school and you have an incoming student, let's say for instance you have a first grader and an incoming kindergartner, if you rank that school that your child already attends as the first choice, we'll guarantee that assignment to that school, so we're keeping children together. I mentioned these 2 preferences because we believe that they're things that parents want. It's the feedback we've received, keeping kids together and keeping students close to home. Thanks, Kyle. We appreciate it. Key feature number 3 is the lottery, and this is interesting because we just ran the lottery last week. And the open enrollment runs from mid-January typically to the beginning of April. And a lot of folks think if they're first in line, they'll get the assignment that they want. And that's just not true. We do see lines that wrap around the building on the first couple of days. It doesn't really matter when you submit your application in that open enrollment period. Typically what you do is you come into the student assignment office, you'll rank all of the schools available to you, going back to those 17 choices you have in the East Zone. You'll rank them from number 1, your most preferred, to number 17, your least preferred school. The computer will assign a random number and stamp it on your application. That random number determines the order that your application is processed and the order in which we fill the schools. We talked about preferences. If you have any of the preferences, it'll actually weight your application and increase your odds of being assigned to that school that you rated your first choice. So we'll run the lottery, and then we'll start assigning the students, which is what we did last Wednesday. Another key thing I want to point out to you is that all our schools have the same amount of capacity. You'll look at a school like Edison Park. Edison Park has 3 kindergarten classrooms, 18 kids per class. That's 54 seats we have at Edison Park. You look at a school like Lehigh Elementary, has 10 kindergarten units, 180 seats. So when you have applicants for those two schools, which one do you think you have a better odds of being assigned to? The one with more seats. So there's a lot of variables that go into the lottery. The random number, your ranking, your preferences, and the number of seats that are available in the school. So that's how the lottery system works. Talking about lottery results, I didn't put the 16-17 up here yet. You might have some questions as how many of these students actually get their first choice school. We looked at the income and grade levels because there's only 3 grade levels that students are required to participate in the lottery. Anybody can, but these are the ones where you have to because it's a grade change. Last year we had 4,585 kindergarten students enter the lottery. 87% of them got their first choice. 6th grade, 79%, and 9th grade, 76%. So the percent getting their first choice kind of drops as we go up in grade level. Anybody have an idea of why? There's fewer schools. Very good. There's fewer schools. So there's less a chance of being assigned. Overall, about 80% of students get their first choice if they're incoming in kindergarten, 6th, and 9th. When we look at the lottery, when it's all done and said, about 96% of parents get one of the top 3 choices. These numbers will steadily improve over the school year because we do run an eligibility pool period. So if you're not assigned to your first choice school, you're put on a waiting list, and the waiting list is determined, your order in the waiting list, going back to that random number, that determines the order in which the waiting list people are assigned to the school. We typically get 35, 40 students off of every eligibility pool earns a seat in the school of their choice. So these numbers do go up. We have a very mobile, high mobility rate in the district, and we see a lot of students either don't come back to the district or move out of zone, and that opens up seats. Another interesting piece of data is when we do call parents after school has started, because it does run to the 2nd week of the school year. A lot of parents say, I'm going to leave my kid where they are. I don't want that first choice seat anymore because I've discovered the school that I've been assigned, it's just as good as the school that I thought was the first choice school. So we have that going on as well. So that's the assignment lottery right now, or last year. And then Kyle, if you go to the next slide, we're going to talk about what we're going to do going forward. Dr. Atkins today, or this evening, shared with you some of the initiatives the districts is going through to improve. We know there's areas that we can improve in. One of those areas is student assignment. The student assignment plan hasn't changed in 11 years. And we know demographics have changed. We know growth has occurred in our district. But we also know that our stakeholders need different things. So we are taking a look at student assignment and ways that we can improve it in many different aspects. So we're looking at the development of a 3-year strategic plan for student assignment. It's going to be a phased-in approach. We're looking at 2018-19, actually seeing the initial implementation of what we're transitioning to. I mentioned how we assign students now because I think it's important to look at some of the features and some of the goals of our current plan. Those are things we might want to retain going forward because they're positive things. The sibling preference. Is that something that we want to move forward with in the new plan? The proximity preferences. Do we want to move forward with that in our new plan? Those are things that we need to consider and I thought was important to share with you. We have 5 plan objectives and we'll jump into them at a very high level at this particular time. All of these initiatives are being captured inside, excuse me, I'm coming over a bad cold, are being captured in a project. And one of the most aggressive projects I would say we have is for student assignment. And I say that because if there's one thing that we're doing that has the opportunity to really impact families and students is the way that we assign students. I think it's very important that we are careful and thoughtful about what we do, make sure we involve stakeholders in whatever we might decide, and make sure it's exactly what we want and it'll achieve the things that we have set for goals. So with that said, the purpose of our project is the assignment, and we're looking at elementary schools first, in this first blush of looking at student assignment, is assigning elementary students to their closest proximity school. So when you talk about those 17 choices in the East Zone, we're now saying that, well, parents might not have 17 choices. They might have choices of 3 or 4 of the closest schools to their home. So proximity to their home is important. And we know that at the same token, that preserving the access to quality programming and the services that parents want in those schools is very important. I told you my kids didn't go to the closest school. It's because I was looking for particular services and particular academic programs. So we're taking away choice from parents. How are we going to ensure that we're still going to provide them everything that they want and all the programming that they could have got from those other 14 schools that we took away from them? That's very important to us. We want to ensure that we have access to the quality program that people desire and it has the services. And I'm talking about services like aftercare, before care. It could be if it's a uniform school. Does it have programming that I desire for my students because it's a good match with their skills? Does it have activities like Odyssey of the Mind? We want to ensure that everybody has access to that. We don't want to take it away from parents. And even more importantly is our operational costs, because right now we do spend, and I know Dr. Atkins has touched upon this in the past, that we spend a lot of money on transporting students, and student assignment implicates that. Remember, if you're in that middle zone, you can go to any school in the zone. So that could be travel times up to an hour and a half, and that's not really what we want. We want students in the classroom learning or at home with their families and not on a bus. We could take these costs that we actually savings that we realize and put that back in and reinvest it in the things that are important to us and our students.
Yeah, we right now, just to give you an idea, we've got about 6.8% of our operational budget is in transportation, and it's entirely too much. If you compare us to the other mega districts in the state of Florida, the average is about 4% of your operational costs. So we're literally ahead of everyone else in the state of Florida in terms of our proportion of our operating expenditures that go to transportation. That's because of the system as it is set up right now. It's just simply not acceptable, particularly as we get funded less and less from the state. We got less than 1% from the state this year to increase our operational budget. It is, and you see how competitive we have to be. It's very difficult when you get less than 1% money, but when you're spending it in transporting students around, that's certainly one place that we can save a lot of dollars. And the good news is, per pupil spending in transportation, we actually compare very favorably. But when you talk about overall cost to our operational budget, that's just too high.
Doctor, is that purely due to size versus count and acreage?
That's one part of it, is size due to acreage. We, in terms of the size of the county, we're one of the largest in the state of Florida. That's one reason. The second is because of all that you heard in like the 17, you might have in one neighborhood 17 different buses going, and then you have what's called ABO, average bus occupancy, isn't as high as the state average, so you've got buses that are less full, and so that increases your operational costs. And then we do have challenges like that river. We have the student assignment system. We also have more canals over in Venice, Italy, and Cape Coral, which is real challenging. And then the final thing is, I didn't know this, but we are one of the most popular, I think the fourth most popular destination in Florida in terms of our population swelling up. And that, of course, we all know has some real unique challenges in terms of getting students to school on time, and actually causes our transportation costs to go up because we're on the roads longer because of traffic.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Atkins. So as far as the project descriptions, we're now initiating a transition from a zone-based, you saw those zones, the zone map, and going to a proximity assignment type system. So if you could envision this, that when a student walks in the student assignment, we're actually going to map them to 3 or 4 of the closest elementary schools to their home. And they'll take those 3 or 4 and they'll have to rank them instead of having 17 choices. And those will be their proximity schools. So, talk about project alignment. This is not really, really important, but superintendent's immediate priority item, and this is a district strategic plan focus area number 7, and using our resources strategically. We're going to transition now and take a couple questions. Yeah?
Just a quick question. Was this year's P1, proximity 1 and proximity 2 weighted any differently than it was the previous year?
No.
And how is the weighting empirically figured? Give me something quantifiable, what weight that carries in the percentage, if you will.
Jeez, I wish I could tell you. What I do know is that there's a number assigned to every application. I believe it's a 12-digit number. And the first 3 digits are influenced by your preference. So let's say, for instance, people that typically have a 1, if they have a preference, it takes it down to a 0. So your numerical order is improved. You jump somebody else. So it influences the sequence of numbers at the beginning of the number. I could provide you we have a document that actually explains how that works. So it's not basically a weight. What it does is it removes digits from your your random number to improve the order of your applications.
It changes the algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. If my number was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would go in and take the first leading number off the 1, so I would be a lower number than you and be assigned before you. So it influences the numbers in the sequence of the way it's assigned.
And so the 50% is what the number was that you don't select your P1?
That's the number of parents who didn't rank that first.
And we all probably did our research and
Sure.
decided for the reasons that we
Sure.
did. And so if you were someone that got, you ranked 5, for instance, and one of them was your P1 and you didn't choose it.
Right.
And your number 1 choice, you were waitlisted, say, to number 110.
Sure.
But your second choice at 9 is just random,
It's random. Absolutely.
based on the differential with weight.
Absolutely. But your preferences only work if you rank that school as your first choice, and then it didn't point out.